Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. And today we have Ryan Standish with us from Scott Bikes, from Rocket Sloth Co.
Yeah.
Ryan, it's good to have you with us, man.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I feel like it's been a little while.
It has, yeah. Now, Ryan just got second place at the Silver Rush 50. That is a Leadville qualifying event. It's in Leadville. It starts with a run.
A sprint.
Up a mountain.
Yeah, 30%.
It's kind of crazy.
Like loose, rocky hill. Yeah.
It's wild. We're going to go over that. We're going to go over a lot of different things, but today we are going to, the wider premise of this episode is like what actually makes you faster. We're going to talk about how to be faster at altitude, but the principles apply to pacing. We're also going to talk about like what things Ryan has found most helpful in his training. Been a professional for many years, but also not just a professional with the life that allows him to just train and do nothing else, but Ryan has consistently throughout his career in different periods had to balance career and everything else. So it's really relatable for all of us listening to this as well. So we're going to talk about a lot of great stuff. It's going to be good. We got this question from Ryan, and it's a bit of a long one, a two-parter, but we're going to go through the whole thing. His question really is in the spirit of Leadville. It's about high-altitude summer racing and all that stuff. Ryan says, I live in Boulder, Colorado at about 5,300 feet. But most of my hard interval work happens higher up, typically between 7,000 to 8,500 feet. So those are big numbers. We're talking somewhere around 2,500 to 2,700 meters, I think. I could be wrong on that. Ryan might be better at running the numbers than I am in my head. Yeah. The high mountain riding this time of year is too good to pass up. I've been comparing heart rate data across different elevations and noticing that while I can usually hit my power targets, my heart rate climbs noticeably at altitude, suggesting I'm working harder than intended. So should I be adjusting my power down to match the physiological cost, or just let it rip and push myself? This is like a really, really good question here. And I want to kind of like go through this one. And really, actually, let's read the next paragraph because he gives some context I think is helpful. He says, I raced the 50 mile at Ned Gravel on Saturday. He says, don't at me for doing the 50. I had a wedding I had to get back to. Yeah, no, there's no judgment.
Life's important.
Good job.
Too.
That's right. It was at 8,000 feet and I didn't look at the power meter once, just raced on feel and had a great day. But I've also had some really rough days at altitude with massive blowups. I accidentally took a wrong turn at Park City Point to Point last year and died 1,000 deaths just finishing.
That race is a brutal race, even if you don't take a wrong turn.
Yeah. While this weekend went well, Leadville is twice as long and certainly much higher. So am I doing myself a disservice by sticking to higher targets and training at altitude? Should I adjust power based on elevation and by how much, or keep the structure closer to home and treat high altitude days as endurance days? Ryan, you live in Durango, Colorado, and everything can you go down from where you are for training? It seems like most things just go up.
You can go down, but not much. Maybe down to 5,000 feet. Like if you go down to Aztec, down to like Farmington, New Mexico area,
okay.
You can go a little lower, but it's a 5-hour loop
similar
to
situation.
go there and back.
Yeah. Similar situation for you. I can't go lower than 4,500 feet where we're at, and I can only go up, and I can go up to around 9,000 to 10,000, depending on, and my average training elevation is also higher. So this is relatable for me as well. Look, like the short answer, really quick, Ryan, your last, or not Ryan. Ryan. We have two
Ryans.
Ryan Cross, Ryan Standish. Ryan, you say keep the structure closer to home and treat high altitude days as endurance days. That's your ideal. Like flat out, that is your ideal. There's the concept that is utilized, and the reason that you see pro cycling teams going to Tahoe, going to all these different areas where they have like high elevation that's really close to, that's really achievable, whether it's Font Romeo, Sierra Nevada, anywhere else, and then they have the ability to drop down to low elevation to do their interval work. They want to do the interval work low because they can hit higher power numbers. And it's not an ego thing. It's because that drives a stronger stimulus to the body. You're outputting more force, more speed. That's going to drive a stronger stimulus to the body to get the adaptations that you want out of the interval training, raising that aerobic threshold up, raising even your anaerobic threshold, all that stuff. But then you don't want, and if you do that stuff up high, it's only going to make it so that you can't get as strong of a stimulus. So you're getting less benefit for your training. And you'll see that instead what pros do is exactly what you've suggested, is that they drop down, do their interval work, and then their endurance work, they do high up high. What do you think about all this?
I'm 100% on board with everything you just said. I mean, sometimes like in training specifically for Leadville, we'll do some intervals up high, like going to Silverton. I think it gets up around 10,000 feet, but doing some interval work but more to get a feel for how it feels to ride at kind of a race intensity at that altitude. I don't think as much for the physiological adaptation, because like you said, your power is going to be lower, so the stimulus I think isn't as good. But just to know, like, this is what's going to happen when I do a threshold interval at 10,000 feet, and kind of being able to gauge. I think we're going to talk about it in a little bit. But your FTP does drop, or your max power, max sustainable power, like everything is lower at 10,000 feet than it is at 6,000 feet.
Yeah, and if you're going up there and you're doing your intervals at higher elevation, Ryan, are you kind of like, you're probably going to be okay with shooting for a lower range of the zone or not hitting the exact prescribed power target, I would assume? Like,
I'm still guilty of trying to hit the regular.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm strong enough to hit that.
Same.
And then you're just screwed for the next 3 of them that you're doing. You're like, oh, well, now it's lower than if I had just backed it off 10% to start with and could have gotten through them. But you're kind of doing endurance for your last threshold interval. But your heart rate's still like 180, still doing threshold heart rate, but endurance.
Yeah, now that
power.
you bring up heart rate. That's an interesting point here. Heart rate, like, it's tricky. Some people might say, like, well, you should just go by heart rate then. But in my opinion, heart rate reacts in ways that are like atypical to elevation, depending on the individual and depending on circumstances. And it's really hard to trust that. And instead, what I would do is, in most cases, if you're doing if you're using TrainerRoad, which Ryan is in this case, you get a range for your power targets when you're riding outside. That range is typically going to be somewhere around like 20 watts. Typically, for most people, it might be a little bit smaller. Sometimes it might be a little bit bigger, depending on what your FTP is. But you typically get somewhere around like a 20 watt range. And what I would do is, if I'm training in a situation where I'm going up higher, I'd drop down to the bottom of the range and shoot for the bottom of the range for the first interval and see how that happens, or see how that feels. And if you need to drop it lower, even from there, then you totally can, and you just like adjust. But, data should always inform perception. Like, it shouldn't just completely replace it. You shouldn't be like, I don't care that my eyeballs are popping out, I need to make the number be the number. You have to pay attention to what your body's doing at the same time. So I would recommend, kind of like, if you do intervals up high, then you adjust in that regard, where you shoot for the bottom of the range and see how that feels. And if you do need to adjust beyond that, you can. But yeah, it's far preferable to do your interval work. And you can do that interval work, especially if you're doing 90-minute workouts. You can do a 90-minute workout likely in a spot that's low, close to home. You can find some sort of climb or some sort of section of road that you can do. And then if you have a workout where it's like the structure, then after that you have endurance, then you can cruise up into the high elevation after the endurance. Or if you just have an endurance day, like you're mentioning, Ryan, just get up there into the high mountains and do that thing up high, But I think the same principle still applies, though. You don't want to be riding your low elevation endurance power if you're going to be 4,000 feet higher than you are back at home, because then you're probably going to be working a lot harder than intended, and suddenly an endurance day becomes a sweet spot day. So
yeah, and I think
adjust.
At least for me, especially having done a few Leadvilles and then Silver Rush this weekend, like Durango's 6,500 feet. So Leadville, you're starting at 10. And I feel like that 3,500, to me, training at 3,000 feet and 6,500 feels pretty similar. But then that 6,500 to 10,000 is a huge, huge, I'm not Keegan. I know Keegan says altitude doesn't exist, but for me, that it depends what 3,500 feet you're going from and to.
Yeah.
Whether there's any science to that, that's how I feel.
It is, yeah. It's not a linear relationship. As you go up higher, the pressure drops off at a greater rate. So like, since there's less pressure, then that means less readily available oxygen, and it just drops off at a higher rate. So no, you're spot on, and it's all supported. I think Keegan just has like red jelly for blood or something, just like packed full of blood, like naturally. He was born that way somehow.
Just strawberry jam in his veins.
Yeah, poor little heart. Okay, part 2 to Ryan's question says, since Leadville's right around the corner, what's worked best historically for pacing at 10,000 plus feet on race day? Power zones will be different, and I've heard of people using heart rate as a ceiling or just going full RPE and praying to the oxygen gods. Any guidance on pacing strategy at true high altitude would be awesome. So I just, and I want to like, this is really important. If you're going by RPE at Leadville, I think you're going to find yourself in a hole. If you're going by heart rate, you're almost certainly going to find yourself in a hole, or very slow and then in a hole. And then if you go by power without adjusting down for elevation, you will blow yourself to pieces. Like, I think the key with all of it is you need to adjust it, but it's really hard for me to adjust my RPE scale and to be like, oh yeah, 5 is a 3 or something else. And that's really tough for me to do and be objective about it. Heart rate is also very tough for me to do there. But what I can say is that power is actually really easy to introduce, like a zero calibration reset and just like shift it over. It's super easy for me. How would you recommend pacing up there, Ryan?
Well, I feel like this is a do as I say, not as I do recommendation. Especially, I guess this is the first time I've done Silver Rush, but all the Leadvilles I've done, I think 3. I am doing in the elite race, and we have Keegan trying to go do it in 5.5 hours. And so everyone rides, like, we all ride Keegan's pace for the first 3 out, like to the bottom of Columbine, and then no one else can do that. But if I was smart about it, I would probably let that go, because I blow up on the way back without fail, like halfway up Columbine, like toast.
Great spot to blow up, by the way. I've ridden
above. A better spot would be when you get to the top of Columbine.
Yeah, still not great, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, pacing is really hard. If I wasn't trying to be in that front group over the top of St. Kevin's and coming down power line on the way out, if I wasn't trying to do that, then I think I'm with you on power being the best way to, if you have access to a power meter, as long as you adjust for elevation. Because RPE, it's like the first 30 minutes, you can kind of push pretty close to what you can when you're not at that altitude, but then you pay a big price for that. You kind of,
yeah, it's like a ballooning interest rate. Yeah, it's like at first it's great,
but then it blows up, and then you can't. It's all gone. You can't, like.
Yeah,
I feel like when you blow up at altitude, you can't. You don't come back.
Yeah,
you're just stuck riding recovery power, but feeling like you're riding threshold.
Oh, it's so bad.
But I think, I mean, if you have the reservation to hold back on those first climbs going out and to be steady going up Columbine, if you still feel good on the way back, then you can kind of disregard the power.
Yep. Stick to RP then.
Yeah. Then you can be like, okay, now we can start to push. I think if I was a smarter bike racer, I would do that.
That's a good point, because the main problem with RPE is early on, right? I think that if you have a good pacing plan, it should feel too easy for the first half, and then it should feel really hard for the second half. Like, the power target doesn't need to change. It's just like, to get the most out of yourself, that's probably what it feels like. But if you don't have like a really well laid out pacing plan, then I kind of like that approach that you mentioned of like using power early on, but then doing RPE later, because you just have to know that, like, at the end of a Leadville, no matter what, it will feel really hard. But if you're properly pacing, it's really from like turquoise, or not, like Twin Lakes going back, it's going to start to feel real bad. But like, you kind of just have to
going fast, or faster than you would if you went by RPE on the way out. Then
yes,
you're going to be really sad about your power on the way back.
For sure. Should we go into some numbers on this too? Like, so using the FTP, which I think, let me see if I have it here. Wow, that's a huge FTP on Ryan. Ryan, your FTP is also big, but in this case, we have an FTP of around 381 at 5,000 feet. That is a big threshold. So down at sea level, that would be a 406 watt FTP. When using a sea level FTP, like that's where you kind of want to start off with this, and then this is the reference point for all of my numbers. Going up to 10,000 feet, your acclimatized FTP, and this is based on this is based on various different researchers. I think it's Perronnet et al. Was the research paper that looked into how FTP is adjusted for elevation. And it's, at least from our experience, it's pretty darn close. There's weird outliers like we talked about with Keegan, where it seems like his FTP doesn't seem to drop very much when he goes up, but he's weird and he's different. For the rest of us, it's much more in line with this. If you're going to go up to 10,000 feet and you're a very fit athlete with years of training behind you, you likely don't have to adjust it quite as much. You would probably be adjusting your FTP somewhere around 17 to 18%. If you are an athlete that doesn't have years of structured training, and I mean like multiple years, like we're talking like 8 years or 5 plus years of structured training where you've really developed a lot of your potential, then you probably want to be more aggressive and drop it by 20%, maybe even like 21%. So for Ryan Cross, the question submitter here, going from 381 watt FTP at 5,000 feet, your FTP up at Leadville is probably going to be closer to around 340, somewhere like 335 to 340 is what you want to use as your FTP. And then for pacing at Leadville, if you can hold somewhere between 75 to 80% of your FTP in terms of your normalized power by the end of the day, you've done a great job, like a very good job. And that's of your adjusted FTP here. If you can do that, that's usually like what I see checks out for most people that do the race. In fact, Ryan, I think we even just looked at your Silver Rush data and it even aligns with that sort of a reduction.
Like almost to a T of that. I think did we say 16% from my 360 watt FTP then it was 310?
Yep. Yeah.
Ish.
Right around there.
And then 80% of that was 280, which I think is around where or 250.
Yep, that would make sense. That's your pacing, and I think
and I didn't really pace that well, but it just turned out that was how it was, which I don't think I could have gone. Well, maybe if I paced, I could have gone better.
Yeah. So the simple math is reduce your sea level FTP by somewhere between 17 to 21%, I think is fair for most people listening to this. If you are less close to your genetic potential with years of layered training, then you're going to want to be closer to 21%. And if you are like an athlete like Ryan Cross, the submitter, or Ryan Standish, you'll be at that 17%, closer to that. So reduce it by 17 to 21%. And then for Leadville pacing, you'd want your normalized power to be somewhere between 75 to 80% of your FTP. Usually giving yourself something about like 15 to 20 watts more on the climbs than what you're doing on the flats. So if you pace the climb somewhere around 85% of that adjusted FTP, and then on the flats, you're trying to ride somewhere around 70% of that adjusted FTP, you're probably going to be in a good spot where you can put in a capacitive effort all the way through that race. It's like the basics of it. And I feel like that I've analyzed so many Leadville power files, Ryan, and like this approach checks out with everybody that has like a good day that didn't just blow themselves out in the first part of the climb. Yeah, it works pretty well. Ryan says, on a personal note, this is my first Leadville and I'm super excited to experience it from the other side. Ryan, if you guys don't know, Ryan actually is deeply involved in the organization of Lifetime's races. So it's really cool that he gets to go and do this, which is really cool.
I've also heard he's super strong right now. So
yes, absolute ox. Yeah, super strong.
He's stronger than me, so...
Yeah, huge power. So he's going to have a fantastic day. Mentions that TR has been instrumental in his training, along with Kate Cross, which congratulations to them. They're expecting a new little one, which is really exciting too. So it's just really cool. Way to go, Ryan. Excited for you. And hopefully that answers your questions. Do your interval training down low, do your endurance stuff up high. If you are going to do your interval training up high, reach for the bottom of the range instead of the mid to the top. And then in terms of pacing, reduce your FTP by your sea level FTP by 17%, then ride at 75 to 80% of that for the race. Kind of
I
straightforward.
think that's all valuable stuff.
Cool.
I'll take that with me too.
Sweet. Taking notes. Brendan's question says, hey, TrainerRoad podcast, since you've been doing some training plan analysis for some athletes, I was wondering if you could do a race analysis and comparison for me. I just completed the Crusher and the Tusher for the second time. While I was able to improve my results and was able to finish 8 minutes faster, my power was higher, and I would expect a greater time improvement for the power increase. Was there a way I raced that was less efficient, causing higher power, but not great time improvements, or did course conditions play a bigger role than I expected? I didn't think the course was any slower than previously, and wind was not much of a factor. My time from 2023 was 5 hours 38 minutes, with an average power of 175 watts. My time on 2025 was 5 hours and 30 minutes, with an average power of 203 watts. So I looked into this athlete's races and their efforts. And here's the deal. 8 minutes is a lot. Ryan, what would you do to drop 8 minutes off your time at Crusher? That would be like the difference between where you're at. Like you could be in the front group.
Yeah, I feel like it's different racing with Keegan because he's always 30 minutes ahead of me. But then to like the main, 8 minutes is a lot when it comes to these races that are pretty stacked now. You look at 8 minutes even at Unbound this year. Like if Cam and Simon Pillow went 8 minutes slower, they would have been 6th and 7th.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's almost a 9 hour race versus a 5.5 hour race. So
it's hard for us amateurs though, I think sometimes, right, Ryan? And maybe you can like resonate with this too. Like you can get an 8 minute improvement, but unless you feel like you were in the hunt and like there was like racing going on and you were making those moves, it doesn't really feel different. And in some cases, even when you finish slower, but you felt like there was a good battle, it doesn't feel as fulfilling. And for amateurs, a lot of the time the field's really spread out. So he may have not even seen somebody around the finish at this time and been kind of like, oh, I didn't do so great. But in reality, he did.
And I think Crusher is, it's such a crusher of even in, I've only done it once, I think 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think I finished with anyone. There was no one. We were kind of like, you catch someone on the climb and then someone else passes you on the climb, but you're all going different speeds. So I think it does come back to like, if you were passing people, it makes you feel like you're riding really strong and you're having a great day. But then the flip side to that, people might be passing you the whole way up Col de Crush. But you might also finish, maybe they put 2 minutes into you on the climb, but that climb's an hour long, and 2 minutes over the course of that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, I think, pretty significant. And I think time gaps just aren't as big as we think they are.
Yeah.
Like you see Keegan win Leadville by 20 minutes, but then the next group is either a group or everyone's coming in a minute apart. So if you went 8 minutes faster, you have the potential to either be 10th or 2nd from looking at it from the pro field standpoint.
100%.
Like 8 minutes is a lot, and
huge.
And try to close an 8 minute gap to someone in front of you, even over the course of a 5 hour race. It's a big gap to close. No matter where in the field you are. If someone's like, you're only 8 minutes down, it's like only
yeah, for sure.
It's kind of a lot. So yeah, I think
when I look at this athletes,
think you should have.
Sorry, keep going. Right?
I think it's easy to think over the course of 5.5 hours that 8 minutes doesn't seem like that much percentage wise. I think to go 8 minutes faster is pretty significant.
Yeah, it's huge. You had a 2.4% reduction in time for a 16% increase in power. And when you look at that at face value, you might be like, what the heck? Why didn't I get a 16% reduction in my time for that 16% increase in power? And it doesn't work that way. It's like it isn't just like a linear relationship where like 1 watt equals 1 second. It doesn't work that way. So in this case, I actually ran the numbers and I checked what Best Bike Split said. So I basically took your race, tried to replicate your race that you did in 2025, and then I ran it against 2023 weather. So it actually uses historical weather data to be able to look at like the exact weather that happened. And then this is starting at the same time. looking at the whole thing, it shows that the weather in 2025 was 1.5 minutes faster. This comes down to barometric pressure, temperature, wind, all those sort of things. Now, granted, there was also probably, you took different lines and there was different gravel, and there's a whole lot of different things within there too that are going to adjust your time. But for what it's worth, Best Bike Split says 2025 was 1.5 minutes faster in terms of weather alone. Then when I adjusted the power to match like the difference between what you did in 2023 to 2025, the difference was 6.5 minutes. So if you add 6.5 minutes plus 1.5 minutes, it equals 8 minutes. So like, it's just directly, it's you got exactly what you earned. That's what you deserved based on the effort and based on the weather. So it actually, the math adds up is the answer. But I do want to talk about this athlete's like performance. And Ryan, you can't see this, but we'll have this in post. Looking at the 2023 race, you can see that your power dropped off as you were going up Col de Crush in particular, but also dropped off throughout the whole day. You started hard, which everybody does start hard, and you started hard also in this 2025 one, but you were able to maintain your power up those long climbs much better than you did in 2023. The other interesting thing is that the variability index, so what that is that's basically your normalized power divided by your average power. In a criterium, you'll see a really high variability index. And in something like a time trial, ideally you see like a very low, if any, variability within your variability index. And in this case, in 2025, you had a lower variability index, which if you're trying to race for the win at the front of a pack, you want to see a higher variability index unless you were solo TTing. That's like what you're going to see. But in amateurs, in our case, we want to see a low variability index because that's going to allow us to actually have a higher average power and like a better, more capacitive effort. So you paced it better. You had a low variability or lower variability index too for the race. You did a fantastic job, I think, throughout this race. And it's worth noting that you had a 14 watt higher FTP in this case. But when you look at the power difference, you had a 25 watt increase in power going from 2023 to 2025. Ideally, you should just see a 14 watt increase in power output, right? Since you were 14 watts faster, but you don't. You actually see it increase. So you did an incredible job. And I think you need to pat yourself on the back and not get caught up in the 8 minutes thing. But if you are caught up in the time, just know the numbers bear out exactly that your increase in power plus the change in weather would equal 8 minutes faster. So
Yeah,
it is what it is.
best. I have to look into this Best Bike Split thing.
It's very good.
It's crazy how I
good.
can analyze the weather and conditions too.
Yeah.
Say what the conditions, how that would have affected the race, and then you can put your own numbers and everything in there too, and it'll tell you what to do to finish in this time, or what change that would be.
And it gives you pacing targets. And the other thing that you can do is to kind of get like a better fix on what the rolling resistance and aero drag figures are. You can try to like reverse engineer things where you basically like say, okay, I know I did this race and this was my time. And then what you can do is you can adjust rolling resistance and drag figures. They kind of give you like base starting points, but usually you have to adjust them a bit to get like really good data. And you can kind of tweak them. So like, for example, if you're seeing that based on what you'll do is, and you'll have landmarks in your race, like a specific climb or a feed zone or something else, and use that as your landmark. And then you can see if Best Bike Split predicted that you would be at that feed zone at that time. Then look at your actual ride file and be like, yes, it's spot on. That's usually a good indication that you have the data set up in terms of your bike's rolling resistance and aerodynamics. But in a situation where you might have, for example, if it's a lot of flat road in between and higher speed in between point A to point B, and it's way off, that means you probably need to focus a bit more on your aerodynamic drag coefficient and adjust that. Whereas if it's something like a big climb, you might want to look into rolling resistance and mechanical resistance that's going on and causing that sort of drag, especially if it's got your speed that's lower than 13 miles an hour or something. So for the nerds, that's a good way to kind of reverse engineer things, and then you can get a really good, for the fellow nerds, I should say, then you can get a really good indication of what you should do at specific events. It's quite helpful. So
that might be a little too involved for me.
Yeah.
I just try to
Fair
be in a
point.
group. That can be my
Yeah.
arrow
Go
thing.
fast, be chill.
Being behind somebody else.
We have one more question from James here, and then we're going to get into Ryan's Silver Rush. We're going to talk about Leadville and Ryan's kind of like goals there and his approach. We're going to talk about what I learned at Ride over the weekend, kind of a cult classic big fondo called the Death Ride, and how I'm going to apply that to try to qualify for Leadville at the Tahoe Trail 100, and some cool things that I tested and some learnings. But James' question first. Ryan, I've been saving this one. We actually reviewed it beforehand, and I felt like you'd be the great one for this one. You also feel like you'd be great for it. It says, "Hey, Coach Jonathan, appreciate all you and the team do there at TrainerRoad with the podcast, video content, and of course the product. TrainerRoad has made me faster and helped my training for 8 years now. I can't imagine training without TrainerRoad. I've got a question that I don't know is possible for some of your pro guests to answer. As I said, I've been using TrainerRoad for 8 years now. I've also trained with a coach for a total of 12 years. During my 8 years with TrainerRoad, 4 of those years have had me using it in conjunction with a coach. Although this might be excessive detail, I switched from a coach of 6 years to TrainerRoad. Then after a year of TrainerRoad, I tried a new coach, but kept my TrainerRoad subscription active and used it to do my coach's workouts. I then went back to TrainerRoad for 2 years, then back to an old coach for 2 years, and now I've just been TrainerRoad only for the past 2 years. Early on, I followed a self-coached approach with TrainerRoad, but over the last 2 years, I've let TrainerRoad take the wheel almost entirely, only adjusting duration or intensity sometimes depending on availability. When I go on forums, I find people debating endlessly about the nuances of training, only to find many of these people aren't as fit as I am, and only to see these people move from one fad to another. They all seem to dismiss the basics of being consistent with your training and valuing structure more than TSS or volume. It always makes me scratch my head when some of these loud voices seem to be so confident in their opinions that they espouse them as fact. So my question for your pro athletes, if they can answer this, is do they get bogged down in the same? What do they think matters most with training? And have any of the fads proved to be a silver bullet for them? I ask this more from a, oh, that's interesting perspective, rather than a, oh, that's what I need to do, because I know I am far from a pro. I just find myself wondering if it's just all of us amateurs that get caught up in this nuance, or if the pros fall prey to it too. Ryan, this one seems like this is down your alley, because you've worked with coaches. You've been using TrainerRoad to guide your training this year.
Yeah.
You kind of had a lot of kind of similar experience to this person.
Also worked at TrainerRoad for.
It's true. Yeah. Some of you may have had like live chats or customer support tickets with Ryan.
But because you had asked if this would be relevant before we started recording, and I was like, that's kind of me or not quite. I haven't bounced back and forth between TrainerRoad and a coach, but I think I would have had a coach for about a little over 15 years of my racing career. So like in high school when I started taking racing seriously and had a coach, and pretty much all the way through to the end of last year was working with, I think it was like three coaches over that 15-year period, 3 different coaches. And this year went all in on TrainerRoad. But I think at the end of the day, it's the consistency for as far as your overall fitness, and being able to race at if racing is what you want to do. The year in, year out training, I guess periodized training is still like a thing that TrainerRoad does, and between different coaches, it's been periodization, but kind of different takes on it. And I did like a somewhat polarized plan, I don't remember, a couple years ago. And I didn't, I guess, fell prey to that through coaching. And I think that was kind of hot at the time.
Definitely was.
And I think at the end of the day, it still came back to riding consistently. And the thing that I think over the years struggled with the most is doing structured training from the beginning of January to the end of October, basically. And you have your little break in there. And
from like a motivation perspective?
Yeah, motivation kind of burnout perspective. It was always tough for me to get through that sort of 10 months of structured training. And this year in switching to TrainerRoad has been tough with injury, I guess, the past 2 years as well, just with it's kind of tendonitis or like low back issues
Knees,
where I couldn't even
back,
put my
ankle.
socks on, and I was like, I couldn't couldn't figure that out. So working with PTs and like massage and dry needling and having all this treatment stuff, and even that too, I think was a lack of consistency in doing strength work and functional mobility stuff, because that's kind of been the big solution coming into this year, is being consistent with the exercises that help strengthen the stabilizer muscles in my hips pretty much. But all that to come back to consistency, earlier this year had kind of still niggling knee issues, and lower back stuff was still a little bit there. And it was because I'd gotten confident that my issues were fixed. So I kind of stopped doing the exercises that helped strengthen that. And then sure enough, a month later, it's like, oh, now the same issues are coming back. So consistency there, I think, is important as well, especially for people who are having issues. And maybe if you're younger, you should do what everyone always told you to do. As far as like stretching and doing some strength work to help the muscles that, especially in cycling, you lose a lot of those stabilizer muscles because you're not having to balance or to do any of that. But then I guess on the bike training side, this year, my kind of TrainerRoad plan that I'm on, I have 2 interval days per week, and then the other kind of rest, like day off on Monday, and then easy day on Friday. And then between that, so Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday are just endurance rides, where I kind of try to keep it endurance, but sometimes it goes out of that. But also keeping it to like, okay, 5 hours on the road doesn't sound exciting. I want to go have fun on the mountain bike for 2 hours or 3 hours. I'm not really keeping myself to like, you have to ride 5 hours today. Like I've done a lot of hours over the last 15 years. I think for me, the biggest thing in my consistency in training has been making sure that I'm having fun riding a bike, because that's why I started riding bikes in the first place. And I think a lot of people are in that boat too. Like if you're really not enjoying doing structured workouts or going on these big long endurance rides, then for me, I'm like, what's the point if I'm not having fun riding a bike?
Yeah, somebody's listening to this that's like me, and they're like, because you ride with your soul, Ryan. Like, and then there's people like me that are riding with Excel sheets, and that's like,
which is why I need like TrainerRoad to make the Excel sheet for me, so I can
yeah.
So I can do 2 days with the Excel sheet, and then 4 days with the soul.
And then it takes care of giving you the right workout on the Excel sheet day, which is like the balance and like what you need there. But this is a really important point that like, and sometimes we can kind of like get away for a short period of time, just like what you said on the strength training side. There's an interesting parallel there where like you can get away without doing strength training, mobility, stretching, whatever it might be, for a short period of time. But then, and if you don't have to ever do this stuff, you're blessed. And I don't know who you are, and I'm very envious. Yeah. But lucky you. But you can kind of get away without doing it for a while, and you can kind of burn that candle wick down. And I would say the same thing about like with motivation with training, where like you can take a different approach and kind of burn that candle wick down. But if it isn't motivating and exciting to you, then it's not long-term sustainable. And then all of this ties back into consistency. Like being consistent it's not just interval to interval or day to day or week to week or month to month, but it's consistent year to year. And then that's the sort of thing where if you can find a way to be consistent year to year, and that's where you start to get these compounding improvements, and that's where you start to actually really raise your what was a ceiling, your ceiling gets raised instead of just going back to the same ceiling every year. So, this is the consistency side of things. When we look at data, it is the number one driver of improvement. It isn't just raw training volume. Like the athletes, you would think that we would see that like, okay, every person that trains at 15 hours per week is faster than a person that trains at 10 hours per week. But that's not the case. What we see instead is that a person that has less days missed And this doesn't just mean that like they ride 7 days a week. They could ride consistently at 4 days a week, but when they don't miss 4 days a week and they don't miss it for years on end, those are the people that actually get outsized improvements with their performance. It's the people that can be whatever their body can tolerate, they do that consistently without missing, and that's where it goes. And to do that, it's not just forcing yourself to make it happen, but it's finding whether it's the physical ability or the psychological ability to be able to be consistent. Like, you have to pay attention to both of them. That's like and so for you, like, you have your structured work, then you have your endurance rides, but your endurance rides, I don't take it that you're like me, where I'm like, I need to be at 75% or I need to be at 70% today. Instead, you're probably out there going like, I'm gonna find an awesome mountain bike ride and I'm gonna ride it. And if my power goes in or out, that's okay. But this is fulfilling my soul and making me love riding my bike. And then that makes it so that tomorrow when I have an interval workout, I'm excited for it.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I'm at a little different position in my racing career now, where I race because I love being at races and being at the events and being a part of the community, and kind of, I don't want to say that I don't care about results anymore, but for me, it's showing up at a race and riding as hard as I can from start to finish. And the result is kind of will be what it'll be. And as long as my tank is empty at the end of the race, then I'm happy and I'm satisfied. And I think that also with my being like riding for the soul and racing for the soul too is, I don't know if it lends itself to being on the podium. I know when I was younger, I was more motivated to do all the interval workouts throughout the week. And this year, I think I'm doing better numbers than I was last year in training. Mm-hmm. And I'm not consistently doing the volume that I was last year. I guess we did the Spirit Tour, which was a 42-hour week at the start of the year. So that was my volume for the year. But being excited to do, whether it's 2 interval workouts a week, or if I'm feeling good and feeling motivated, I might add another one if I'm feeling fresh. So I guess the consistency, but also the joy of riding bikes, I think, is making me faster again this year. Mm-hmm. Kind of like finding that love for riding and racing again, instead of just being like, I'm doing this because I have to perform, and I have to hit these numbers. It's like, if I don't hit the numbers, then maybe I need another rest day and hit the numbers, or just go ride the jump trails and go ride with some buddies, or take the e-bike out and ride that. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
this
consistency.
That's and man, broken record, beating the same drum, whatever you want to say, but look, it's not just in cycling. It's like in everything that you see. I bet that if you look across the board, it's that consistency, That's how we iterate, and that's how we improve, not just like consciously, but subconsciously. That's how our body improves and iterates too. So it all makes sense. This is an interesting point where he says, have any of the fads proved to be a silver bullet for them? I feel like some things might be considered a fad, like high carb intake, but
that
I'm
was
not
going to
sure
be my one thing that I think
it's huge though.
It is. I don't see it being a fad, because everybody is going so much faster now than they were before. And even I've found maybe that's why I'm going faster at races this year, because I'm actually able to stomach 120 grams of carb an hour. And I know that's still like just a little over half of what some other guys are doing, but it's just a big step. It's like twice as much as I used to be able to do in previous years. So I think that's a big piece for having more energy at the end of a race or a long training ride, or being in the high country for 5 hours and not just limping home at the end.
It also makes tomorrow's workout more feasible and increases your motivation for tomorrow's workout. I know that sounds weird to somebody, but the way that it increases your motivation is you aren't destroyed, like Ryan said, and limping back after a ride. It's really hard to get motivated to ride tomorrow when you're just completely cracked and bonked. You don't want to ride anymore. Like, you're done with it. So it's it's another thing that really fuels the possibility of being consistent with your training. And of course, also like in the moment with it. It's just really interesting because we don't really have, we like to think that we have everything figured out with research and with scientific research. But the whole point of scientific research is to constantly explore and learn. It's not to reach a final verdict on anything. It's to constantly explore and gather more learning. And it's really interesting because we don't really know. The numbers don't add up why an athlete taking in 160 grams of carbs per hour would be better than taking in 90 grams of carbs per hour. But what we're seeing in practice is that a lot of these top athletes, and this isn't just like a 1-year thing, but this is over years, top performers are taking in higher amounts of carbohydrate and seeing better performances. So we've got something to learn here in terms of, oxidation and how it's being utilized or what isn't being utilized. It'll be really interesting to kind of figure it all out and move forward. But I mean, consistency and carbs fuels that. Finding the right training plan, really, I guess, is like what you were talking about, that like fits your schedule, but also like your motivation and what you want to do. All those things. It's kind of, in this case, it's what we have hinted at from James, that it's not going to be a silver bullet or anything else. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's cool.
Also, it's figuring out what motivates you to ride, whether it's for you, the Excel sheet and the numbers are motivating. And for me, it's having a good time out there and still like really enjoying it's still the process of getting stronger or maintaining fitness or maintaining skills on the mountain bike or going out and doing that. And I think doing that week in, week out, year in, year out that's the silver bullet. just keep doing it week in, week out, and take time off. If you really don't want to get on the bike, then it's not going to benefit you to get on the bike and not be happy the whole time. You don't have to always be happy when you're riding your bike, but but it helps if you're dreading doing a workout or dreading getting on the bike, then go for a jog or do an hour recovery spin or go ride mountain bike, go ride some fun trails. And then you still have that consistency piece of getting outside or getting on the trainer or doing something is better than sitting on the couch probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your silver rush, Ryan. You got second place. Got a Leadville coin, which means that you qualified for Leadville. You mentioned that you went out way too hard on the climb on this one. Can we talk about like what you ran for this and if it's going to be in terms of your equipment, nutrition, and pacing, and then how you're going to change that for Leadville?
Cool. I'll try to. Well, to start, Leadville doesn't start with a run, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's like maybe 100 yards and probably
it's steep.
200 feet vertical elevation. It's like, I think it's 30 or 35% grade on this. This steep, and you start off your bike. I don't think there's any way you could ride not a full power e-bike up this hill.
Yeah, it's steep.
And there's a coin at the top of that run. They have the first
really?
male and female to the top of that run gets a coin. There was like the guy in front of me had running shoes on and his buddy was carrying his bike shoes for him to the top and he didn't win, which is, I felt kind of sad for him, but it was also kind of funny that someone else beat him to the top. But then, what was my plan was to do, I guess, fueling wise, 120 grams an hour, and was planning Never Second was there and they had fuel at all the aid stations. So they had their high carb drink mix and then their gels. And I was like, I didn't really want to wear a Camelback. I think it's 7,500 feet of climbing in 50 miles.
Cool.
Yeah, had planned to stop at the turnaround. So it's similar to Leadville and Leadville 100, and then it's an out and back. So I was planning at the top, stop and fill up one bottle. I had a 1 liter bottle and then a 750 ml bottle that I started with both of those full. I was like, I can get to the top. It should be about 2-ish hours to the top, and then just fill up one bottle to come back, thinking that it was net downhill coming back. So I think that was pretty good.
Add on the weight.
Yeah.
Nice.
have less weight to go down than I did to start going up.
Yeah.
And then pacing, like I didn't really have a pacing plan for this one. I was kind of like, I knew the overall podium. So the top 3 men and top 3 women got coins to get into Leadville. So that I was kind of like, I just have to be in the top 3. And that's whatever pace I have to go for that is what it'll be. And also so Kobe Freeburn was on the start line. He's been having a really good year. Another Durango guy and young. I think he's 23, maybe 24. So I was like, okay, he's good at altitude. And we were kind of on the front, and then the first climb is 2,000 foot climb. So from 10 to 12,000 feet in 7.5 miles, I think 8 miles. And
that's big.
He kind of pushed the pace a little bit, and we ended up just the 2 of us with a bit of a gap. And I was like, man, I am not going to go. My rule was like, I shouldn't go over 350 watts, which is right around my Durango elevation FTP. It's just 360. I was like, no surging. I did that sprint up the hill, and then I was like, we should just, so I think we should just keep it steady. And I don't remember. I think that climb ended up being about 280 normalized power for that. And then you descend down, and then I had looked at the profile before the race and thought, oh, you do the first massive climb, and then it's kind of rolling until the turnaround point. And turns out you do like another 1,500 foot climb is the second climb of the day, and it's steep and loose. And so Kobe started to put a bit of a gap in me there, and I was like, I should probably take it a little easy, not keep digging this hole. But at the turnaround, I think I was about 30 seconds back on him, and could see, you kind of like do this little lollipop, so you can't see anyone who's like within probably between 20 and 20 seconds and a minute gap. You couldn't see anyone, so I didn't know how far the guys behind me were, but saw a few more. It's like, okay, just keep it steady and stay ahead of the next guys. And then the wheels started coming off. I was like looking down, I was like, I'm doing like 160 watts, and that feels like threshold.
Feels hard.
Trying hard.
Oh no.
And then I ended up getting caught by his name's Kyle. I don't remember his last name. On the descent that you're going 2 ways, kind of like Columbine, but way narrower and way looser. Which was, it's sketchy, but it's also, I think that's kind of part of these races, that it's always been like that. And it's kind of, for me, it's a highlight too, because I can be cheering them on and they're cheering me on. And it's this cool opportunity for the pros to see the amateurs. And if it means you have to descend a little slower, I think that's part of the event too. I don't think we should be like putting each other at risk just to go a little faster.
Smart.
But so bottom of that descent, I had gotten caught by Kyle, and we went up the final climb, which is back up to the high point of the race at 12,000 feet. We kind of looked at each other like, he was like, this is just endurance for you, isn't it? And I was like, not really. Like the power says it's just endurance, but my heart says that I should slow down, that this is hard. And you can kind of see for a really long way on that last, it's kind of a wider, smoother road climb, or dirt road, but smooth. And we looked behind us and could see, I know you have some experience with John Wessling, racing with him.
Yes, yeah.
I could see him
absolutely.
Maybe a minute behind, and I was like, we're in second and third right now. Kobe was long gone. I think he had probably 10 minutes on us, at least by the finish. And then, really long 8-mile descent back to the start finish. John caught us at the bottom of that before it kind of flattens out in the last couple miles to the finish. Yeah, he was moving. We looked around, we were like, oh, panicked. Like now there's now it's second through fourth. Someone's gonna, you would still get a coin because you would lead you'd be the winner of your age group. I learned all these rules for coins.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then Kyle cramped real bad. I thought I was still bonked, and John attacked us right when he caught us. So I was like, I have to get back on to his wheel. Then like you get your competitive inner being comes out, and I was like, I can't let John beat me. Like, no way. And rode back onto him just before the last little, I don't know, mile of single track. And I was like, I had pre-rode that just before the start and knew there was this kicker just before the finish. And we came around this corner and I carried my speed and just smoked him on this climb. And but I think,
nice work.
And he said something. I think he was like, I can't do that. And by the finish, I think I had like 15 or 20 seconds on him in like a couple 100 meters. I was like, nice. Oh, that felt good.
Good work, man.
But then I guess bike setup, I was also testing out the hardtail. I had a hardtail high post, Scott scale, for Leadville. No inserts, and I hit rim a couple times, but didn't lose any air. Yeah, it was high risk because the descents are such high speed. And they have these, like, there'll be just come into like a little rock field. Well, we'll find out if this works. But I think, for Leadville, I think I'll still run the hardtail, but I'll probably put a dropper on just to.
Why would you put a dropper on for the course at Leadville? This is an interesting point, and I think it's good for people to hear.
I think similar to Silver Rush, I think the hardtail for the weight, which I also, if you look at Best Bike Split, I think it tells you that weight doesn't really make that much of a difference.
That's correct. It makes less of a difference than we think. Yep.
So, but the dropper on the hardtail, because the descents are, especially coming down power line, going out, and then also the top of Columbine are these like really chunky sections, and with the dropper down, you can kind of let the bike float through that a little better than when you have the high post. You have a lot of weight. It's harder to get your weight back and let the bike move on those rocks, kind of using your legs as suspension. That's my theory, at least. I don't have science. I just, it feels safer to have a dropper and let safer from breaking a wheel on a rock that you didn't see. With the high post, feels like you're more likely to.
I think there's two reasons, in my opinion, there's two main reasons also. Like, if you're going to run a hardtail, you want that dropper for the reason that Ryan said, is because you have more tendency to flat on a hardtail because of less suspension and compliance. And then if you also have a high post up there, then you can't use your body's suspension either. So then it's even worse. So like, it's almost like if you're running a full suspension, you might have more. It might be better to consider running a high post perhaps there. But with a hardtail, I would want a dropper for sure. But then the other side that pushes me toward a dropper across the board is the fact that it's a long day, man. And
just being able to sit.
It feels so good, right? Well, after you climb up Columbine and how hard that is, you like being able to just sit in that dropper and have a different position, so then you can stretch and move around your back. It relieves so much. And that is the sort of thing that makes it so that toward the end of the day, you're just a bit more comfortable, or maybe better said, slightly less uncomfortable. And then that allows you to hold higher power. So I think the dropper, you don't run a dropper at Leadville because there's a drop. There's a gnarly section that's just going to require you to have that sort of a capable of a bike. It's to avoid flats, but above all, to increase your comfort throughout the day. Comfort's fast.
Now you got me thinking I need to run the Spark, the full suspension.
Man, it might be good, you know?
I was also thinking there were a couple, I think 2 or 3 sections in the Silver Rush that I had to get off and walk a couple of them because I ran a 36 tooth chainring, which I wasn't strong enough to ride those like super steep, and then it gets loose, and you're on these little kind of baby head rocks that roll easily, and it's a little bumpy. And on the hardtail, I feel like you have less traction because it doesn't absorb the wheel doesn't stay on the ground as well as if you're on a full suspension, which is funny to think about that from a climbing perspective, not just a descending and comfort perspective, but the traction on the climb, I think the full suspension would be, or is better there as well.
And you run into that at the top of Columbine and on Powerline for sure. Like where traction's, you can't just put out 500 watts because your tire would just spin. So you have to it's a weird balancing act where all you're doing is like 200 watts, but it feels like you're putting out 1,000 because you're doing that while trying to maintain perfect traction, and it's really, you're just riding the line. So,
and then you roll off with that little baby head, and that's where you, the wheel leaves the ground. It's like the rough climbs are where the full suspension is super nice on the climb.
I would venture a guess that almost everybody would be faster if the full suspension is like a very optimized one, like the Scott Spark or the new Epic 8 or any of those. Those bikes are so fast. I'm even on a course like Leadville, I feel confident that people would be faster on that because they'd be more comfortable and they wouldn't have to fight for as much traction. But
and on the same descents too, smoother and less risk of flatting. There, you just convinced me. I think I'm running the full suspension. Changed my mind.
I think it's faster. You can also get away with faster tires then. If you run a more compliant and capable bike, you can actually put yourself in a spot where you might run the Aspen, which you would probably run anyway, but the Aspen STs, and maybe you run like a 225 ST because that tire's really fast rolling compared to even the 2.4. And then if you run that thing on there, then you actually could maybe, whereas on the hardtail, if you ran those 225s, it would be a lot rougher and trickier and more likely to puncture. But now on the full suspension, you could.
But then do you run drop bars?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I didn't mean to. We don't need to get started. I'm not running drop bars at Leadville.
Yeah.
I'm riding a real mountain bike. So
I don't think that most people are faster with drop bars on their mountain bike because, and I know aerodynamically in theory they would be, but it compromises your power output and handling a lot unless you somehow can find the perfect combo. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense at first, but when you think about it, having the right stem length is really, an angle is really complicated on a hardtail or full suspension bike going to drop bars because of the fact that drop bars have a further forward reach, and then the angle at which you hold your hoods also changes everything in terms of what feels comfortable and right, and it allows you to have not too much neck tension, shoulder tension, core. It's way more complicated than just doing like trigonometry to find out, my hands are in the right spot. Yeah. It should work. That's hard enough. But then on top of that, when your hands are in this different position, it also changes how you feel. And on a mountain bike and on mountain bike terrain, it's tough.
Yeah. I tinkered around. I actually raced the Sea Otter gravel race on a drop bar hardtail. More because I had spent quite a bit of time trying to make it work and wanted to race it once.
Yeah.
But it rides weird. It doesn't feel, obviously a mountain bike is not designed geometry wise to have drop bars. So putting them, even if, like you said, you make all the measurements right, but it's still not made to be ridden like that. So I could make it feel comfortable to pedal, but then riding it was just not, it was just weird.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the things I'm changing, or things I tested at the Death Ride this weekend and what I'm going to try to do? Because this weekend is the Tahoe Trail 100. If you're listening to this on a Thursday, in 2 days, I'll be doing that race. To qualify there, just like at Silver Rush, I would have to be one of the first 3 finishers or win my age group. I will not be one of the first 3 finishers. We don't have to worry about any suspense on that. I also don't think it's going to be possible for me to win my age group. It's going to be, I've done it before, but I was faster. I was at like 4.3 watts per kilogram, 4.4 maybe even higher, 4.4. And right now I'm at 4.2 actually. So that's tough just by the numbers. That's tougher. But also I think that the fields are much more competitive now than they used to be, like particularly these age group fields. So it'll be really tough. The course is going to be really hard. I talked all about that last week, went through all that. But this last weekend, I rode a big fondo called the Death Ride, and I tested some things. First thing that I tested is a pacing plan So again, I'm Excel sheet. I'm very robotic about sticking to things, and I like to do that. All of that said, with a course like Tahoe Trail 100, you need to be able to punch at different times and push. And if I am going to be in the spot where I have to race for an age group win, I wanted to try a longer day where I allowed myself to reach a little bit higher, and I wasn't so perfectly controlled within like a 5-watt range all day. And instead, I was allowing myself a bigger range. I did that and I felt good. I did experience like a bit of like, it wasn't cramping, but it was the twinges that strike the fear in your heart and make you, yeah. So I did have twinges on the inner thigh, like always. And I think that a lot of that actually came down to the fact that I was getting a little sloppy with my pedaling technique. When it was getting hot and more difficult, that started to slide. I kind of like refocused and I thought, okay, like make sure that you're using your glutes, make sure that you're using like, and I really just made sure that I had the proper technique, and really it started to go away. And by the end of the race, it was completely gone, which was great.
Maybe
for
I could
me.
take some notes on that.
I say that, but we'll see at Tahoe Trail 100. I have a feeling that those little gremlins are going to creep their way back in for sure into my inner, into those muscles and twinge. Which it's always trickier on a mountain bike course, because then you start descending and it's a different position, and then you go through like a compression and then your leg cramps and it's like something like, okay, I'm going to die. Like,
you can't do anything
I'm going to blow off
about
this berm. But that pacing plan allowed me to, instead of, for example, hold very strictly from like 230 to 235 on the climbs, I was allowing myself to go from 225 up to like 250. And I know that doesn't sound like a big difference, but it actually does start to make a difference. And then when the climbing, because there were climbs that were like, there were like 30% pitches on some of these climbs I did, super steep. And in those situations, I just matched the pitch. So if I had to do 480 watts going up it, I allowed myself to do it. I wasn't looking to paperboy or roll a really small cadence. I just like met the pitch. You know what I mean? Like, okay, stand up and lean into it and get after this thing. And I did that because that is really what you end up having to do much more so on mountain biking, and the body did okay on a 6-hour, 36-minute day. I didn't cramp, and that was great. So that was good. Gave me some confidence coming in. The other thing I did on the nutrition side was it was really hot. It was 104 degrees down in like the low points, but I kind of finished right when the real heat was setting in, but it was plenty hot. When I look back at like the temperature, the max temperature that I had on the ride with radiant heat from the road was 104 degrees at one point. And that was toward the end of it. So I think the majority of the ride was in cooler conditions, but still plenty hot. What I wanted to do is usually I take in I try to take in somewhere around 750 milliliters to a liter an hour of fluid. And in that, I usually have 120 grams of carbs an hour. So if I'm taking in roughly that 1 liter-ish with 120 grams per hour, the tricky thing is when it gets really hot and I need more fluid, then I start taking it down, and then suddenly I'm at 150 or 160 grams per hour and the gut explodes and you have a problem. So what I wanted to do was lean out my mix a little bit, water it down, so to speak. So first thing that I did is I wanted to get an up-to-date figure on what my sweat was. So Gatorade sweat patches from Amazon showed up at the door. You put those things on. They do not stick, by the way, to my skin. I don't know what's wrong with my skin. I clean it with alcohol. I put those things on. They stick, and then as soon as I sweat, they just fall off, which seems like they're kind of missing their point. So yeah. So I had to like wrap like a ace bandage sort of a thing around it, and then I could ride with it and then check. I did a sweat test, and after all the heat acclimation, I did one before and I was losing 850 milliliters per hour. And then I did one after and I'm losing almost 1.4 liters an hour after the heat acclimation protocol that I was doing in the sauna, which is a huge change. That's massive.
It's so like not quite double,
almost
but
double.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. So huge change. So suddenly I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with fluid? The logistics plan was really complex with feeds and everything else, but I carried 1 liter bottles, and then I would drink like 1 1/3 of those bottles every hour. So then that's kind of like what I kept up on, but I mixed those 1 liter bottles at 60 grams of carbs. And then I allowed myself to take 1 to 2 gels per hour thereafter. That way, I was still getting up to my point where I was around 120 grams an hour. I think by the end, I averaged 109 grams an hour, which is fine. I didn't have any gut issues. I tend to have gut issues in the heat, like most people do, because gut perfusion and all those issues that you have. But that leaned out approach worked really well. I just had to carry a lot of gels, and it was just kind of annoying to have to constantly take in gels because I usually just take everything through mix. But I do think that if I had gone the other approach, my gut would have blown up. And I took so it was a smart approach. So the takeaway, if you're in hot conditions, try leaning out your mix. Mix less grams of carbs per fluid that you take in per hour, and then bring in something else to bring in the carbs and separate it from the fluid. That way you can take in more fluid if you need it, and if you're feeling the sensations of heat that you need to combat with more fluid, and then you can cover that. I also did, oh yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say I have one kind of tangent, but question, because I've wondered it myself, but I haven't actually measured. But if you're doing 120 grams of carb in a 1 liter bottle, in theory, would that be taking away 120 mil from the actual fluid that you're putting in that bottle? Or
oh, I see what you mean. Yeah,
because you're filling that weight with sugar instead of with fluid. So I don't know if that's also a factor when you're mixing these really high carb drink mix. You're also reducing the fluid that's
a good point.
You can put in that
and
bottle. I haven't measured.
Really thought about that.
I was just like, I wonder if that's a factor.
Along those lines, I was like, well, how much do I lose to respiration? So I went down a rabbit hole of looking at different studies and trying to figure it out, because we breathe out a lot of water, and roughly what it seems like is somewhere between 20 to 25% of whatever you lose to sweat, if you're in an active state, is lost to respiration. So suddenly I'm like, oh geez,
that is
that's
double.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So suddenly I'm taking in it's like another 250 to 300 milliliters that I need to take in. And suddenly I was like, all right, well, I can't let's just stick to my plan and see.
An hour.
Yeah. Let's stick to my plan and see how much I have to pee. And I did, I usually during long rides, peeing I don't have to pee a whole lot. And in this case, I had to stop to pee twice. And then I really had to pee when I was done too. So that's a sign to me that either I'm not used to taking in this much fluid, I took in too much fluid, and maybe there was something wrong with the sweat test. Or maybe that's supposed to be right. I don't know. And you're supposed to be able to, to pee like that. But anyways, I still had to. And I think that if I had added on made up for respiration, I would have had to pee even more. So yeah. I'm okay with, I think, the approach. But I guess long story short is, in hot conditions, try to separate your carbs a little bit more from your fluid intake. Maybe not entirely, because it's really hard to stay up on your carbs then, but just reduce the amount of carbs that you mix. So then that way you can take in flexible amounts of fluid and still keep going. So when I started out earlier in the day, I was taking 2 gels an hour because I was drinking less fluid because it was colder and I hadn't started sweating as much. So I was then taking in less carbs. It's all like these weird sliding scales that I was trying to adjust with the plan. But then later on in the day, it was taking in, 1 gel because I was taking in a lot more fluid, and that was pushing me up to 90 grams right there. And then the 1 gel got me to 120. So, it's all kind of, it all kind of worked out. In terms of sodium, I just mix in 2 grams of table salt into my per hour, basically. And that gives me 800 milligrams of sodium. And by the sweat test, that's sufficient. That's about what I lose. I'm getting more sodium than that also because Never Second gels have sodium in them. So
but
I was probably getting excess sodium.
Crazy amount of sodium in their gels.
It's not.
I want to say it's 120 milligrams or something in those.
Yeah, it's a small amount. So it's not like it's completely changing the game. But yeah, it went really well. And now for Tahoe Trail 100, I have to apply the same, but I have to use a hydration pack, and I have to figure out how we're going to do the laps because it's 3 laps. So hopefully that's helpful to hear about this, leaning out the mix and trying that strategy. And then on the pacing side, allowing yourself to kind of work within a range. It's still not like I'm just going crazy with the power and not looking at my power meter. I still am.
I think
I'm excited to see.
Especially for pacing, for me, it's more like setting a ceiling that don't go over that in the first 2 hours, which I think I need to adjust my ceiling for the higher altitude.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
kind of like
Gotta
what you're
cap.
saying is having that range where you can like try to be in that range, I think is a great idea instead of having one number like that you want to hit. If you're like between 220 and 260, like it's a pretty big range, but if you're somewhere in there, then you can consistently be in there for the day, which would be good.
That's right. And I know saying this, somebody's listening to this is going to be in my age group and that will beat me. And they're like, and they're probably just going to use all this. And I get it. I know I'm sabotaging myself here, but I'm just banking on the fact that if I stick to a measured approach, that other people will perhaps let emotions get the best of them and blow up. And that's my only bet at getting
People
in.
like me.
The soul riders.
Yeah.
And then, or I get in through a lottery, but that they do at the end. They call out a handful of names basically, and you see if you get it. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to it. If we covered a lot of ground on this one, some main principles. Consistency is what makes you faster, and you have to find ways to make yourself consistent. Part of that is getting the right training plan that allows you to not get too fatigued and stay motivated. It's making sure you're fueling the work and doing that. If you're going to be doing something where you're racing at higher elevation, power is your friend as long as it's adjusted by the amount that you need to adjust. If you're going up to 10,000 feet, you can adjust that down. If you want us to build some sort of like a calculator for this, for how to adjust your FTP based on elevation for pacing purposes, let us know. And if that's of interest, maybe we build that. Just drop it in the YouTube comments below. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, like Ryan Standish is doing, you can go use TrainerRoad. It's pretty sweet. You can sign up now. It's AI cycling coaching built from the ground up. We don't use some sort of like blanket language learning model like ChatGPT and just have it tell you things. We use AI in the specific ways that it's best used. Like, for example, machine learning to analyze your workouts.
It's funny you
Go ahead.
bring this up now, or I can bring this up now that I had a workout. It had adapted me down because I hadn't done a, I think, threshold workout in a while. And it was like these hard start thresholds. And it was like, you should be a level 2 instead of a level 4.5. And I was like, I can do this workout. And I just did not. I made it through 3 of them. It was like a four by, I want to say it was 15 minutes total. It was like blocks of 5 minutes with a minute in between, and then 4 of those. And I made it through 2 of them pretty good. The third one was like on the cusp of not being like, actually the third one I was like well below the power. I was like, you know what? TrainerRoad was right. I shouldn't have.
Dang it.
I was like, I was way too overconfident. I was like, I can do that. But just to say, it knew that I shouldn't have done that. But
and we're using
I
AI
let my ego get in the way.
Ego does often get in the way with training for sure. We're using AI in a way that we can't yet talk about publicly that affected what Ryan got for that workout there, which is pretty cool. And it's cool to see that it works. We use it in ways to detect FTP, and we also use it to analyze all of your workouts with machine learning. We don't just say AI and apply it as a magic blanket, but we build our own models in very specific ways with our own data set that looks at all sorts of types of riding. And as a result, it's actually using AI in the ways that it's meant to be used to make you faster. It's really exciting stuff. So no fluff, no marketing BS. It's using AI to make you faster. AI cycling coaching. Go sign up for TrainerRoad. Go do it. It'll make you faster. Build a custom plan for you. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.